When Canada and the US send millions of dollars of military equipment from our taxes to a settler entity, and when peace activists each have to donate a few dollars from their personal revenue in the hopes that after those equipments were sent, a family won't go hungry, we can sense that there's something seriously wrong with this little thing we call the world order. But you all know that. The real puzzlement is what to do with this world order and not just know it or protest against it. I gave a talk at the student encampment at UQAM last summer, and I started with the need to recognize as our duty to help with the rebuilding of universities in Gaza that were obviously one of the prime targets of the colonial process of underdeveloping a nation. Even though the term underdevelopment has been created to describe the colonial situation that happened in Africa, I do think that the term is highly enlightening when we want to describe what happened in Gaza in the past months as well. When you destroy the infrastructure, and specifically the medical and educational infrastructure of a nation, you send the trajectory of prosperity and advancement and livelihood of a nation back to centuries. My message to all the people that are worried about the destruction of universities might sound obvious or even tacky, but I do think it's important. It's an important task you should focus on. Start organizing committees to start thinking about how you can disrupt this underdevelopment and start asking, how can we ensure that a systemic revival of universities and schools become one of the most pressing demands in a way that Canadian policymakers cannot be able to ignore. When Canada has been complicit in this underdevelopment through its military contracts, it's not up to individual activists to take up the systemic revival or even volunteer with a rebuilding individually, even though I'm up for it anytime. However, it is up to the individual activists to form collective thinking circles, to think of ways to demand from the government to see the systemic revival of academia in Gaza as a mode of reparation to what our military aid did to Gaza itself. It is up to you to present this initiative to the public as one of the most urgent ethical commitments that Canada should undertake. It's important to make sure it becomes a mainstream talking point for politicians and make it move beyond your activist circles. A very, very difficult feat, of course. We owe it to all the people who lost their lives in this live colonialism, those who made it possible to talk about Palestine more freely in academia, to ensure this revival gets to the offices of political candidates and political policymakers and into future policies. I know I don't speak for myself when I say that I would jump at any opportunity to help with the systemic revival. I mention systemic because it's important that this does not remain as standalone gestures. This sounds cliche, but if the systemic revival does not become a collective and national policy, it would only crumble into temporary attempts. I'm thankful to you, to your thoughts, your hearts, your souls, and your existences in this world. Those who are not limiting themselves to performative acts of decolonization, but get in trouble fighting alive colonialism. Take care of yourselves, everybody.